Support comes from Seattle Restored, revitalizing Seattle neighborhoods with creativity and commerce. Over 95 vacant storefronts have been transformed into vibrant pop-up shops, window art installations, and artist residences. Explore current and past locations at seattlerestored.org.
Support comes from Pacific Northwest Ballet, presenting the Northwest holiday tradition, the Nutcracker, live and on stage at McCaw Hall through December 28th. The Nutcracker is a journey through a holiday party, epic battle, and falling snow in the land of sweets. Tickets and info at pnb.org.
Hey there, welcome to Meet Me Here, your weekly guide to arts and culture events worth leaving your house for. I am Dyer Oxley. That means this week we are talking pop culture. And I want to start by asking you this question. Have you seen any good local movies lately? And I emphasize that word local, right? Let's take two movies, for example, Megan and The Boys in the Boat. Two very different movies, very popular movies, modern tech industry in Seattle, historic University of Washington in Seattle, but they were not filmed in Seattle. You know, and this kind of thing happens a lot around Washington. In fact, the film industry, some would say, is largely absent from Washington state. Washington's economic film activity can be summed up in the millions, while our neighbor just to the north, British Columbia, is raking in billions. Sometimes it feels like Hollywood decided to move up north, but it just skipped over Washington and brought all of its money, all of its jobs over to Vancouver, BC. And you know, that's just the dollars and cents of the matter. There's this other aspect with this issue that I always bring up, and that is pride. This region kind of used to be proud of our local filming, right? We had Twin Peaks, we had Northern Exposure, Sleepless in Seattle. Now it kind of stings a little bit when you see palm trees in the background of what is supposed to be the Pacific Northwest. So what can be done about this? What can we do to get more local productions off the ground here locally? I am bringing in a few film experts on the show today to perhaps push back a little bit on what I'm saying here, but also dive deep into this issue. But first, as always, I am going to tell you about an event that I think is pretty cool. And that event is Captain Slinky presents the Oddmall Emporium of the Weird, which is November 8th through 9th at the Evergreen State Fairgrounds in Monroe. Oddmall Emporium of the Weird is an arts and crafts show that leans heavily into the DIY, the weird, the bizarre. Basically, what I would argue is that true, genuine Northwest culture, that weirdness. This is the quirky end of the arts and crafts spectrum, and bonus, this is the Creepsmas edition of the Oddmall. So it's kind of like a Christmas show for people who have more fun at Halloween. We're talking about jewelry made from silverware, snarky tote bags and t-shirts, funky paintings, there's woodworking and candles. This is a one-stop holiday shop filled with gifts that you're probably not going to find anywhere else. You can have a lot of fun with that. Check out Oddmall Emporium on Facebook or oddmall.co. And if you do end up going, find Captain Slinky, ask him how he got his name. It's kind of a cute story. Okay, I want to get back into it with some of those nuts and bolts of filming in Washington State that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to do my best to spare you the wonky explanation for all this. But just something quick to understand here. Different states offer incentive packages to attract Hollywood's film projects. That's like TV shows, movies, commercials. Basically, filmmakers can get some cash back for spending locally. It's why you often see the state of Georgia or Vancouver, BC at the end credits for a lot of what you watch. And that ends up to a way of getting outside money brought into your state. And that brings us to Washington, which has revamped its film incentive in recent years to make it a bit more competitive, but it is still falling a bit short of our neighbors to the north, and we have struggled to compete at times. That is why we often see Vancouver, BC standing in for Seattle or any other Northwest locale. To help explain this, I am bringing in Megan Griffiths, local filmmaker who has actually set her movies in Washington and, get this, filmed them in Washington. For example, her films Lucky Them or The Off Hours. I like those films. That's actually Georgetown. That's actually Burien. That is the Mount Si Tavern over in North Bend. That is here. Megan has also worked on projects like The Night Stalker with Lou Diamond Phillips and is currently making an animated documentary, View from the Floor. Welcome to Meet Me Here, Megan.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure having you here. I have also brought in local film critic Chase Hutchinson. Chase is vice president of the Seattle Film Critics Society, which has its annual Pacific Northwest Award screening series coming up on October 29th through November 23rd. This is basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chase, this is a series for films highlighting the best stuff from our region, the stuff that's made locally and released over the past year.
Yes.
One film is going to be honored with a coveted Film Critics Award at the end of all of this, correct?
Yes, but they all are winners in my heart because they have shot here.
What a wonderfully political answer. Thank you. Welcome back to the show, Chase.
Thank you so much for having me.
Megan, I'm going to kick this off with you because you're behind the camera, right?
Well, I will say, you mentioned in the intro that I've shot a lot of things set in Washington that have been shot in Washington. I've also shot a lot of things in Washington that were not set in Washington.
Right.
And that's because our environments are so varied. Like Eden, for example, is set in the American Southwest. And we shot the exteriors of it primarily in the central part of Washington State. We did a couple days of running around shooting in Vegas area just to get some establishing shots. But the rest of it really sold that landscape.
See, that is my argument. Like, too, it's like it doesn't have to necessarily. The premise of this is set in Washington, but it doesn't have to be that. All those years of Stargate didn't have to be in Vancouver. We could have faked a desert out here.
Yeah, I shot Year of the Fox is set in Seattle, but also in Aspen, and we shot in a North Bend area for Aspen. So we have like rainforest, we have mountains, we have desert, we have farmland. We just really kind of have a lot of the different landscapes you might need.
Now, you might disagree with my premise on this, but I mean, do you feel the film industry at large is just not as present in Washington State? And why is that?
I feel the film industry at large is suffering everywhere right now. I just went online just to see what the statistics were because you get, as a person who works in film, especially as I have worked in television, you just feel a difference. And I know so many crew members who are either leaving the industry or just really having trouble right now, not just in Washington, in Los Angeles and all sorts of places. And it's just because 40-something% of the productions that were here in 2022 are now in international cities. You know, they're not being shot in the U.S. So yes, I wish there was more stuff happening in Washington, but it's not alone. There's a lot of places that are experiencing.
So even though we're seeing Georgia and Vancouver, BC at the end credits for a lot of these films, they might be suffering themselves, and it's just all going to Bulgaria or someplace like that.
Mm-hmm. And I just heard that Marvel is leaving Georgia, so
really?
I don't know like how they're going to be faring after that either. Yeah, I feel like it's the whole industry is really kind of in tough straits these days.
That's fast. I had not heard that about Marvel. Chase, I also argue that local pride is a big part of this. I feel like that alone is a valid reason to discuss all this beyond the numbers. But you're a film critic. You watch a lot of movies. Is there something that's lost? Are you noticing something that when you see a movie and all of a sudden that's not Seattle?
Yeah. And I won't go too hard on the movies I don't like. I want to celebrate the ones that do shoot here, because the thing I was going to say...
Oh, that's fine. Go ahead.
I'll start with a positive and then go to, I think, a negative example. Piggybacking off what Megan said, where Washington can be anywhere, it can be outer space. There was a movie, Prospect, a few years ago.
True.
That introduced the world to Pedro Pascal, who's now everywhere. That was shot entirely in the forested areas of the Olympic Park, I believe, or Olympic Peninsula. And it looks amazing. And you're like, why has no one shot 50 more sci-fi movies here? It was incredible. On the flip side of it, there was a movie recently, it was a horror comedy that I won't name, that had a big scene of a character running to the airport to try and stop their lover from going away. And there's a sign that says SeaTac, and then the camera shifts and you see palm trees towering in the background, and immediately you know that's not Seattle. And it's not the biggest problem in the world. Other people won't really notice it, but for the folks that are here, it kind of takes you out of a movie. You lose something in that moment.
Right. No, I agree. And I'm sorry, I missed, you said it, I missed it. What was that film called again?
Hard Eyes.
Okay, I did it. Okay.
Which other people had a good time with. I don't want
Right.
to say that this means you can't make a good movie, but I think you could also make that good movie here as well.
This whole issue, as I understand it, this is part of kind of the ongoing discussion over at Seattle Film Critics Society. This is going to be discussed during the upcoming award series. What's the thought behind that? Why do you feel that this is an important issue that Washington should be discussing?
Well, I think it's that people should come out and celebrate the movies that are shot in the state, in the region, because there are a lot of great ones. We this year, narrowing down, had a hard time. And every year I'm like, this is great. This is great that we're struggling with this. We have a very interesting dramedy called Twinless. That's a very twisty movie that I can't spoil about two men living in Portland and then also coming to several Kraken games. We have this really interesting film called To Kill a Wolf. That's a reinterpretation of the Little Red Riding story. We have several great documentaries, WTO 99 about the WTO protests.
And these are all within the past year.
Yes, that they were released. Production takes a long time,
Right.
because then the last one I was going to mention was Wolfland, which is also a very interesting documentary. We had a lot of wolves this year.
You just listed off a lot of films, and I'm wondering, broad audience perspective, I mean, how many people do you think ultimately get aware of these films versus, I don't want to say what Netflix puts in front of them, or what shows up at the theater, because a lot of those films I feel like folks just don't hear about.
That is what we're trying to lend our voice to hopefully bring more eyeballs to them. Some of these films have had some sort of limited theatrical release. WTO 99 just played at the Tacoma Film Festival, and it was their opening night film and was great, and has been at like True False and a few other festivals. To Kill a Wolf also had screened briefly at a few theaters locally. But we want people to know that there's these films, that there's this work being done here, that there are these talented visionaries here working against sometimes very tough odds to get their vision off the ground. And we want to see more people engaging with that however we can.
But is something lost if a film is set here and then not filmed here? And I'll throw this more broadly speaking. I mean, is something lost because it's set and not filmed here? But I mean, is Washington just missing out by not having the film industry here more broadly?
I think so. I think seeing different parts of a city that is not just the same B-roll establishing shot of the Space Needle. There are neighborhoods. There are entire little nuances and buildings and feelings that can come from seeing the city from a different perspective, from a grounded perspective, from people that know it inside and out.
I feel like movies that are set here and not shot here are missing out on us, like as opposed to them. You know, I just feel like there's so much texture and like specificity that can enrich a movie when it's shot in the place where it's set. And you know, this is coming from a person who shoots other things that are set other places in this state. But you know, you're always looking for those ways to connect it and make it feel this grounded in a real world environment.
Yeah.
I mean, as a person who works here and wants to work at home as often as possible, yes, I would definitely love to see more things come here, especially larger productions that could sustain our community better. So certainly not going to say that we aren't missing out on something, but I do think they're missing out as well by choosing to shoot other places.
And I won't list every single great movie that Megan has been a part of, but I will specifically mention Your Sister's Sister, which was a film I saw at the SIF Egyptian, one of the last films I'll ever get to see there, unfortunately. That I feel like showed a very specific, intimate, confined portrait of the state that I've never really seen quite like it. And if we don't kind of have the opportunity for those films, because I would love to see millions and millions of big films come in here. There was Kimmy, the Steven Soderbergh movie from a while ago. But I also want to see people who have stories to tell here getting their chance to do so as well.
Aside from just the background, I mean, it's quite clear when the background people aren't that special type of weird, and you can tell, right? And that's when you know it's not local. So let me ask you both then, just to round this out. Do you have any particularly cringe-worthy examples of the films depicting, you could say Seattle or Washington, but were not shot here? I know you mentioned one, Chase, already. Do you have any other that come to your mind?
I think The Boys in the Boat was a tough one. And I don't mean to pick on that particularly, but there were just multiple moments where you could feel that this wasn't here. And I think that's an unfortunate thing, because it was so much about this team training on the waters in Washington, finding their bonds there, and then to see that not really ground itself in the state is tough. There were some people, again, that very much liked that, but I think it would have been a nice thing to see a film like that. And maybe we could have in 10 years a new take on it from this perspective.
Hey, we love remaking movies.
I know.
Megan?
This is not an example of this, but like there's a movie called Rumble in the Bronx that I remember was shot in Canada, and like there's scenes with
Jackie
like beautiful mountains in the background, and it's supposed to be in the Bronx, and like there's nothing like of that magnitude that pops into my mind. Maybe this palm tree example would be in that category.
And there was the conversation in Kimmy where her apartment that she has, I don't know where you were able to afford and get the amount of space for that apartment, because they did shoot most of that movie in Seattle, but that was in Los Angeles, I believe.
One thing I'm going to give a shout out to, I don't really have a cringeworthy thing, but I just want to give a high five to the 1990s Highlander TV series, because Seattle was all the rage. You had to set everything in Seattle, but they knew they were never going to film in Seattle. They were going to film in Vancouver. So they made up a Pacific Northwest city called Seacouver. And that is where that show takes place, in the fictitious Seacouver, which I appreciate the effort that they were trying. Anyway, let's end on a positive. Which movie nailed it? Which movie should our listeners watch that truly represents the Pacific Northwest in all of our glory?
I could start with a mainstream one, which is one that people might already be aware of, but The Ring, which was the Gore Verbinski horror movie.
Yeah.
That captured the city pretty well. There was a great piece again in the Seattle Times of like walking through all the locations, because it was essentially the Seattle PI, that was where she worked. Rest in peace also to the Seattle PI. That one stands out in the mind as being really special.
I worked on that for 2 days.
Oh, yeah.
PA. Yeah.
And the thing is, for folks that aren't from around here, that one really works too, because everybody in this region has a similar experience with a well. Yeah. Megan?
Singles.
Singles? Okay.
I mean, that's one of the reasons I wanted to live here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I loved that movie back in the day. I saw it the first day it was available I lived in northern Idaho at the time, so it wasn't like whenever it opened everywhere else. But when it came over to Pullman, I went and saw it, and I was just obsessed and really it was one of the reasons that I wanted to move here. And then when I did move here, I shot a movie called Shag Carpet Sunset. Well, shout out to that small movie. And we shot in the singles apartments, and it was a very special full circle moment for me.
I'm going to call out again the Northern Exposure TV show, just because it's set in Alaska, but filmed here. But there was this local pride involved with that show, and I feel like it carried our region's weirdness with it quite a bit. The kind of the quirkiness that was inherent within our Northwest culture here. I felt that was a very good I want to say explanation, very good example of the environment around here. Okay. Megan Griffiths, local filmmaker, and Chase Hutchinson, local film critic. And once again, that event coming up, Chase, is
the Seattle Film Critics Society PNW Awards Screening Series, which is running from October 29th through November 23rd.
Thank you both for coming on Meet Me Here and chatting with us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And coming up after the break, we are going to hear from someone hard at work to get more film crews working locally in the Evergreen State.
Support comes from Seattle Restored, revitalizing Seattle neighborhoods with creativity and commerce. Over 95 vacant storefronts have been transformed into vibrant pop-up shops, window art installations, and artist residences. Explore current and past locations at seattlerestored.org.
Support comes from Pacific Northwest Ballet, presenting the Northwest holiday tradition, the Nutcracker, live and on stage at McCaw Hall through December 28th. The Nutcracker is a journey through a holiday party, epic battle, and falling snow in the land of sweets. Tickets and info at pnb.org.
All right, Act 2, change scene. Washington does have its own incentive program. It is managed by Washington Filmworks. And that brings me to my next guest, Amy Lillard, Executive Director of Washington Filmworks. Thank you for joining me here on Meet Me Here, Amy.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted that you're interested in talking about film in Washington.
So in the first segment here, we heard from Chase Hutchinson about The Boys in the Boat and the shame he felt that such a Washington-based story wasn't filmed here. You, however, were actively trying to get this movie to film here. Ultimately, it wasn't. Do you want to bring us through what exactly happened?
So that's a really good segue into what Washington Filmworks is best known for, which is is the incentive program. To give some context to listeners, incentives are, tools that we have in our toolbox to attract production to Washington State. There are only, last I counted, 10 states in the United States that do not have an incentive program. It is the way that the industry does business, and without one, you're not very competitive. So when we go back to Boys in the Boat, we certainly were tracking that project for years. I mean, had great partnerships with the University of Washington. I mean, we saw so many directors come and go from that project, but ultimately they chose to go abroad where the incentive was more lucrative. I don't know what the ending budget was on that, but I'm imagining it was again, this is my just guess, somewhere like in the $30 million range. Like, we couldn't afford that at that time, which is why we're really delighted to have seen that increase in 2022 to the program.
And you also personally feel that at George Clooney's commute probably had something to do with it, but we don't have to name names for that.
Who are we talking about?
George Clooney. Sorry.
Right, and I think his home is in Italy, isn't that right? And they filmed in London,
right?
I think, yeah.
That's just a hop for him. So let's dig into that a little bit deeper. I promised folks I wasn't going to get too wonky, but basically, correct me if I sum up things wrong. Washington says we're going to give you X amount of money back if you spend X amount of money in the state, right? And we've capped that off. We're not made of money. We don't have a lot of money to the sky's not the limit. So we say, hey, we have $15 million to do that. So if we have folks coming to film locally in the state, we'll give you some money back, and that might give you a little incentive to come and film here. Washington, we're kind of competing with the folks around us at the same time. So we have BC, where their film incentive, that the sky is the limit. Oregon has its own film incentive. Even not locally, Georgia seems to be standing in for Washington a lot more these days as well. And Georgia's been really competitive. So can you kind of tell folks, nuts and bolts, what exactly is Washington doing to get folks to come here to film with this film incentive?
Right. So you had mentioned this little place called Vancouver, right, north
Yes.
of us. So they have a limitless incentive, right? So that is why they're seeing Marvel movie number 25, and they have 6 Marvel movies like filming at one time. I really think about it, Washington Filmworks, we really think about our market being Oregon, Montana, and even Utah. Those are like the same level of incentive. And, when producers are looking for a home for their film, we have similar topography, we have similar incentives, we have similar crew bases. So that's really our market. The way that Washington remains competitive, we know what our marketplace is, right? So we're not looking for, like you said, the big George Clooney movie. We're really looking for the film, say, somewhere between $5 and $15, $18 million. That's kind of our sweet spot. That is where we have worked consistently since the incentive has gotten increased, and we're really good at that. We're really good at that. So some of the things that, I would point folks to in the audience to take a look at are projects like Captain Fantastic, which is just a love letter to locations in Washington. I would also suggest Penelope, which was an independently made episodic series that is on Netflix directed by Mel Eslin, who's also a Seattle resident, who is also the president of Duplass Brothers Productions. I would point people to, if you're a kind of a horror fan, which I feel like most people are these days, I would check out the 5 seasons of Z Nation, which filmed on the other side of the state in Spokane. But we have such a long history of film in Washington State, period. But the incentive, has really, increased that significantly since we started the program in 2007 is when we launched it.
We started off talking about one movie that we wanted to get here. It ultimately was not filmed here. However, I know you have another story. The way you put it to me before was that you stole this film, and now we have a film that basically I have not stopped hearing film critics, film nerds, they have just not stopped talking about Train Dreams. And that was filmed here locally, and you know a little thing about the background of that one?
I do know a thing or two about that one. It's a great story, and I think it demonstrates, as we've been talking about, the importance and the impact of the incentive. So Train Dreams is a feature film that was directed by Clint Bentley, and they came to Washington. It's based on a novella of the same name. And they came to Washington looking for one specific location. They were going to drop in, they were going to do that one scene, and then they were going to go to the Eastern Bloc of Europe, right? That was the plan. So when they arrived, we started showing them around, and we found some key locations, and we said, what are you doing? Why would you not film the whole thing here? And indeed they did. So they were one of the first projects that qualified for one of our enhanced incentives. And so they got an additional uplift back. That plus the fact that they were able to do, everything from start to finish. They took advantage of some of the most beautiful rural locations like Medellin Falls in Washington. They filmed all over the state. And they didn't go to the Eastern Bloc. They stayed right here. So that was, that's, again, the power of the incentive. We have really talented crew. And here we are, talking to Netflix about an Oscar contender. So we couldn't be more happy.
That's right. Take that, Eastern Europe. Last question for you, and a very, very important one. Favorite movie or show, I'll throw that in there too, that has been filmed in Washington State.
Oh, I can't do that. I love them all.
This is like saying you love all your children, but we all know one of those kids is doing better in school than the other ones. I don't know, but is there anyone that off the top of your head you are not beholden to it right now at all? Say, oh yeah, no, this is one that I watched recently and I loved.
I have to tell you, do you know how many films? It's 149 projects have come through the program, and I've been here since 2006.
Tell you what, I'm going to throw this one out there for you, and this one's going to get me a lot of hate.
Okay.
This goes back to the 90s. I like Northern Exposure more than Twin Peaks. I will throw that out there. Filmed exact same time, exact same area here in Washington State, but Northern Exposure just hits my sweet spot, I think, a little bit more than Twin Peaks. I look forward to all the hate mail for that.
You want to hear a funny anecdote?
Let's do it.
David Lynch was in town, and my brother is an actor. His name is Matthew Lillard.
Am I thinking of Matt Lillard, Scream?
Yes.
Okay, punk rock. Okay, I always associate him with that punk rock. Okay, I did not know that. Wow. Okay.
And we were talking about, we have this really amazing project coming in. I'm really excited about it. The director's kind of iconic and all these things. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm working on this amazing project too. And, I can't talk about it because I signed an NDA. And it's like, oh, so did I, As it turns out, my brother was in this David Lynch's project, and it filmed up here. And you know who put that together? My mother. My mom was like, you two need to talk to each other about this project. So
what project was that?
now this is a test for you, Mr.
Oh, you're going to do... Okay.
I'm not going to tell you neither.
I'm not going to know. I'm not going to... Well, I mean, if it's not Twin Peaks and he does like doing that... Well, there's the Twin Peaks The Return, of course.
That was it.
Oh, that was it? Okay. I'm going to stop going down the Lillard rabbit hole now, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's a cool factoid to know about you, though. Amy Lillard is executive director of Washington Filmworks. Thank you so much for coming on Meet Me Here and talking with us about film.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
If you want to see that screening of Train Dreams at SIFF downtown, you still got time. That is happening Wednesday, October 29th. You can check the link in the show notes. Meet Me Here is produced by KUOW, a proud member of the NPR network. It is hosted by Jeannie Yandel, Katie Campbell, and Dyer Oxley. It is produced by Kyle Norris, Brandy Fullwood, and Matt Martin. If you like Meet Me Here, please rate and review us. It does really help get the word out about this show. Podcasts like Meet Me Here, they are only possible because of your financial support. You can help us make all of these shows that you rely on over at kuow.org/meet. And thanks for listening.
Hey, I'm Ton Vin, host of the Seattle Eats podcast. I want you to join me, Kenshi Lopez Alt, and Rachel Bell for a special live taping of the show. We'll share insider tips, foodie secrets, and answers to your biggest dining questions. Join us Monday, November 10th at 7:30 p.m. at Town Hall Seattle. Find out more and get tickets at kuow.org/events.
KUOW live events are sponsored by Finney Ridge Painting.
On the latest Sound Politics, the Pacific Northwest has become a target for President Trump. He invited a group of right-wing influencers from across our region to talk about problems plaguing the, quote, war-ravaged city of Portland. What's the truth on the ground in Portland? And is Seattle next? That's on the latest Sound Politics, wherever you get your podcasts.